Although the idea is to use fresh herbs, we'd all like to preserve some of these wonderful flavors for the winter days too. So let's take a look at how easy it is to dry your own herbs. Carrie, are there any special tricks to drying herbs?
Drying herbs, most herbs anyway, is pretty easy. You just cut them off the plant, tie them up with a rubber band. The reason you use a rubber band is because the herbs do shrink as they dry. Obviously, they lose water.
Oh, I see.
And the rubber band, because it's elastic, shrinks with them. You use a piece of string, you end up with your little bunch falling apart.
That makes sense.
You snip off your extra pieces that I've just broken off. Get rid of that.
Okay.
And just take a simple paper clip, hook it into the rubber band, and hang it up in your kitchen. Or you wouldn't really want to hang it in the greenhouse where we are now. You'd want to hang it in a darker spot that wasn't quite so bright, so the herbs retain their oils and their flavor as they dry.
Oh, I see. So being in a bright, sunlit, sun-filled area would
Tends
not
to bleach
enable
it out
them.
of them.
I see. Okay.
Once they're dry, such as this oregano, which is very nice and dry, a little bit crumbly to the touch, as you can see, you can then take the herbs off the stem if you wish and store them in a dust-free environment inside a little jar, which you would then also keep out of direct light, perhaps in your kitchen cabinet.
Can you use the stems also?
The stems tend to be a little bit fibrous and chewy, so I would generally say just use the leafy parts.
Okay.
If it crumbles easily, you can use it. If it's hard to break, leave it alone.
Now, are there any other ways to preserve herbs other than drying them and putting them in a container like that?
Well, drying them is certainly the easiest. You can put them in the microwave, and you can probably freeze dry some of them if you happen to have a freeze drying machine.
You can actually put them in the microwave?
Right, yes. Very quick instant drying technique. You can also preserve them by putting them in vinegars and oils, and even in butters. You can take fresh basil and chop it up and mix it in with a little bit of butter and roll it out and wrap it up in some wrap and put it in the freezer.
No kidding.
And slice
what
it
a
off
neat
in
idea.
little cute rounds.
Now, when you are drying an herb and hanging it to dry, about how long does that take, or does it vary from herb to herb?
It varies from herb to herb, and it varies from where you live. Here in the Northwest, it's a little damp, and it takes longer than it would in Southern California.
There are special techniques for harvesting different types of herbs. You need to find the growing node. So Diane's going to explain to us what the growing node is and how to look for it.
The growing node is a point where the stem comes up with its crown, and then it'll have two leaves on either side, and you can cut at that point, and then those two smaller leaves will grow out and branch out.
So we're kind of like cutting at the intersection.
Exactly.
Okay. You want to show us an example of that?
Yeah. I'll show you on the basil here. You can just here's the point right here. There's the two leaves, and you just make a snip right in the center.
Great. Can I have that?
You may.
Great.
And rosemary is the same thing. It's a little bit harder to find.
It looks a little harder to find.
Yeah, but it's the same. And you just find it and snip it. And it's okay if you get some of the other leaves.
Okay. That won't hurt anything then.
No. And then here's thyme, which is a little different because it's so woody.
Woody is that stem part we've talked about earlier that looks like bark. Okay.
And same thing, find the same kind of node and just make a cut.
All right. So how far down on an herb like this that has that kind of bark to it, how far down do you cut that? How far down can you go before you look for a growing node?
Try to stay above the woodiness.
Okay. Now, what about the chives? It doesn't look to me like they have a growing node.
Right, they don't. What happens with chives is their feeding system runs from the bottom, clear up to the top, and then back down. So if you cut them, if you cut them at this point, the food will run up and not have anywhere to go, and so that piece will die. With chives, you want to take a few of them and take your scissors and cut them about 2 inches from the base of the soil.
And those will grow back?
And those will grow back in about 2 weeks.
Great.
And if you need all of the chives, you can cut the whole lot of them.
These colorful flowers are tuberous begonias, and they're my favorite edible flower. All these different colors, and you can take off little pieces of them and put them in sauces, and as you swirl them through, you have these wonderful swirls of color. They're sort of citrusy in flavor.
When you grow your own herbs in the garden, obviously there's a couple extra steps you need to take in between the garden and the kitchen in preparing your herbs. So, Colleen, why don't you help us understand what those extra steps are and how do we prep our herbs for cooking?
First, after cleaning your herbs, that's, again, if you want to clean your herbs, basil, for instance, will grow clean. It doesn't grow close to the ground, for instance, like maybe thyme and oregano.
So you don't always wash the herbs?
Not necessarily. I won't wash them unless I see a bit of dirt on them.
So would there be circumstances in which you would wash using chemical pesticides?
Exactly. If I knew if it was an organic garden, I wouldn't care personally. But if there's pesticides, definitely I'd wash them in cool water and make sure they're completely dry before chopping them.
Okay, so basically don't unless you have to.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what I do is just take basil and pull it off the stem.
Now you're not using the stem.
I don't use the stem. You can use the stem maybe for infused oils and things like that. You don't have to throw it away.
Does the stem vary in flavor at all from the leaf?
Well, it's a little tough, and maybe a little bit more concentrated too.
Okay.
So then what I'll do is take a chef knife and hold the tip to the edge of the cutting board and go ahead with the rocking motion, chop it. Okay, and then
Now,
also
if you were to chop that up finer, would it change the flavor at all?
it would. You would get more of a concentrated flavor in whatever you're using it. But it's also okay for salads or soups or whatever, just to go ahead and tear it.
Now, what about rosemary?
Okay, rosemary I wouldn't clean, and also I wouldn't chop real fine, for instance, if I'm using it in bread. But in order to pick it, just kind of pull it off the stems. I wouldn't use the stems because it's real woody. It's something I wouldn't want to put in my mouth.
And woody means?
Well, it's tough, not a lot of flavor there either.
Now, you wouldn't chop these individual needles off the rosemary because?
Well, it depends on what you're using them for, but for example, breads, I don't want a real strong rosemary flavor because I consider a real robust herb.
So this would be more pungent if we were to cut it up.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
And thyme is over there. That's an herb another robust herb. I would also maybe give it a wash because it grows close to the ground. So
you
it does
would,
get a little gritty. But however, if it's coming out of an organic garden, I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay.
Generally, they're more clean. Again, just pull it off the stem.
Now, it looks like you're including some of the stem, no?
Well, the tips I would because they're more tender.
Okay.
So then I wouldn't worry about it. And this is pretty young thyme, so I'd go ahead and add that to it.
All right.
And again, just give it a quick chop.
Oh, you do chop the thyme even
I
though
do.
it's so teeny?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
Okay.
And what is this?
This is oregano, another
Oh,
robust
okay.
herb. And again, when it's older, the stems will get a little woodier, so it's really easy to clean. Just sort of pull it right off,
Okay.
just like that. And I would go ahead and chop this the same.
So, how far in advance of preparing a recipe should I chop up and prepare the herbs?
Just before you're ready to use them. The longer they sit around, again, they'll dissipate into the air. And you'll lose the flavor, a lot of the flavor.
Is there anything else? Now, what about this? What about the bay leaf?
Well, actually, you would use that for more in stews or soups or in stocks.
Now, I've seen it used whole a lot,
Um,
like in a soup stock.
Right, to give flavor. It's something you wouldn't want to eat. So if you're using it in a stew or a stock, you would strain that out definitely.
Is that something we should clean?
No, not really. And when I put it in stocks, I'll just kind of crumple it up a little bit and drop it in the stock pot.
Oh, so you don't usually chop it ever?
No, not at all.
This is one of my favorite herbs, Alocia triphylla, known as lemon verbena, which was discovered by the conquistadors in the 16th century on the Peru-Bolivian border. They were immensely charmed by its fragrance, and it was taken back to Europe where it was incorporated into cuisine and even as a fragrance for colognes. The easiest thing to do with it today is to make a wonderful tea, and in our restaurant we make fabulous sorbets from it.